Norway. Welcome to the land of awe-inspiring fjords, majestic mountains and unforgettable glaciers. In part 3 of my Norway travel documentary series, I will take you to some of the most famous fjords and glaciers in Norway. We go high up into the mountains of central Norway, take the world's longest tunnel, visit the colorful city of Bergen, my favorite city in Norway, and hike up to Tungestolen, an outlet glacier of the monumental Jostedalsbreen, an unforgettable experience. If you haven't seen the previous parts of my Norway documentary series, please make sure to check them out too. But let's continue on my grand Norwegian road trip to the Nordkapp. I woke up in a nice chalet in Haugesund, getting ready for yet another spectacular day in Norway. I had spent the night next to a national landmark that commemorates Harald Fairhair and his role as the unifier of the Norwegian Empire. The site marks his possible but not confirmed gravesite. The monument consists of a large mound with a 17-meter high granite obelisk that is surrounded by 29 memorial stones, one of each of the historical counties of Norway. The monument was erected in 1872, commemorating 1,000 years since the Battle of Hardangerfjord. Interestingly, a small hill next to the monument features a 3-meter tall stone cross that is believed to have been erected in the early Christian times in Norway, not to mark a burial ground, but to indicate a Christian gathering place. It is estimated that this cross was put up around the year 1000. The site was very peaceful when I visited, especially in the early morning hours. Sheep grazed in the lush green pastures next to the monuments, and the colorful local bluebells, meadow buttercups and butterfly bushes, still covered by morning dew, sparkled in the rising sun. But it was time to leave Haugesund and head eastwards again into Norway's mountainous regions. My goal for today was to drive all the way to Odda, the unofficial base camp of the famous Trolltunga hike. To drive to Odda was nothing short of spectacular. I passed the most serene landscapes with waters that were so clear and calm that they offered reflections as perfect mirrors of the sky. The surreal scenery played with my senses, acting as if the clouds had dropped into the lakes, meandering slowly through the waters. I passed picturesque small villages and settlements that felt as if the time had stood still. Wooden red boat sheds lined the shores of pristine fjords that only got disturbed by an occasional wind breeze or incoming fisher boats. driving the stunning mountain road along the monumental Acrafjord, I stopped at the majestic Langfoss. With a total vertical height of 612 meters, one of the highest waterfalls in the country. Framed on both sides of thick pine forests, it has its roots way above the timberline, falling almost vertically down into Acrafjord, only disturbed by a few dramatic cliffs on the way. Marveled at the precious boathouses and small villages that seemed abandoned, yet meticulously maintained. To drive to Odda seems like a never-ending series of waterfalls, one more awe-inspiring than the next. When I finally reached Odda, dark clouds had made their way into the valley again. I strolled through the lovely streets of the small industrial town at the southern end of Hardangerfjord. But eventually heavy rainfall kicked in, which forced me to spend the rest of the late afternoon hours indoors. Unfortunately, the weather forecast was equally disappointing. Predictions of heavy rainfall for the entire week made a hike to Trolltunga, if not impossible, at the very least rather unpleasant. The 8 to 12 hour hike is said to be long and strenuous, and both physically and mentally demanding. Even experienced hikers at times struggle to go the full 27 kilometers, overcoming elevation gains of 800 meters or 2,600 feet. It's an epic mountain which will remain on my bucket list for another, more favorable time. Instead, I continued my journey along Hardangerfjord, passing the many lush orchards that are famous for their apple cider and red cherries. Benefiting from a short break in the heavy rains, I stopped in the village of Lofthus to visit the old stone church of Ullensvang. The large Gothic-style church dates all the way back to the year 1250, making it one of the oldest stone churches in Norway. Just below the church, a pretty jetty and adjacent beach invite to take a swim on sunnier days. Despite the grey clouds, I nevertheless enjoyed the lovely view across Hardangerfjord. Driving in this region is nothing short of spectacular. Each turn offers new exciting vistas across the fjords, majestic bridges connect tunnels on both sides of steep mountains, picturesque islands emerge out of the fjord waters, and fish farms tell the story of fishery livelihoods that date back centuries. My next stop was yet another waterfall highlight not to be missed on any trip to Norway. The famous Steindalsfossen is not known for its tremendous height, but rather for its unique location. It is one of the very few waterfalls that allow visitors to walk behind the falling water masses. This is a unique experience that is only possible in few locations in the world. I personally only recall Seljalandsfoss in southern Iceland and Stabach Falls in Switzerland's Lauterbrunnen Valley that offer similar access to the elements, but of course there might be others. No wonder Steindalsfossen is one of the most visited tourist sites in Norway. The waterfall is 46 meters or 151 feet high, with a main drop of 20 meters, about 66 feet, and is part of the Fosselva River that comes from the water of the Lake Miklavatnet. It was definitely a fun thing to do, but I recommend you bring some waterproof jackets, as there's a good chance you will get soaked otherwise. Bergen, Norway's unofficial cultural capital and gateway to the fjords. If there's one Norwegian city you manage to fit into your itinerary, it probably needs to be Bergen. This gem of a city has much to offer. Lille Lunge Gardsvatnet, a picturesque central artificial lake that is framed by important art museums and flamboyant historical buildings, the quaint pedestrian zone lined with all the major shops, cafes, fast food restaurants and awe-inspiring monuments, the famous seafood and fish market, and one of the perhaps most popular postcard motifs, the traditional colorful houses that line the Bergen harbor area. I strolled over the impressive Bergenhus fortress that dates back to 1261, when it was built to protect the entrance to the port of Bergen. This historical building has a long history as a royal palace and is yet another must-see landmark in Bergen. I went to visit the Leprosy Museum, a fascinating museum housed in the original 18th century buildings of St. George's Hospital, where Dr. Armauer Hansen discovered the leprosy bacteria in 1873. The museum provides a fantastic insight into Norway's history of leprosy and the struggle to overcome the disease and related stigma. And there is so much more to see in Bergen, like the cathedral, the traditional modern residential areas, the famous Gustav Grieg house and the magnificent Fantoft Stave Church, which I will all cover in more detail in a separate full city guide video. I was anxious to head back into the mountains. My next day that started with a long and beautiful drive on panoramic mountain roads, passing roaring mountain streams, fast-moving cloud formations, and an array of seemingly never-ending tunnels. I eventually arrived at my first stop for the day, the impressive Nærøyfjord, which is only reachable by going through a long, narrow, dimly lit tunnel. The drive along the fjord shores is spectacular, and the road comes to a sudden end at the village of Bakka. From there, trails lead to the magnificent Jostedalsfossen Waterfalls. The Bakka Kirke overlooks quietly the fjord scenery as the occasional boat makes its way between the steep mountain walls on both sides of the fjord. I continued my journey to my next destination, the famous Flam village, situated right at the tip of yet another must-see fjord, the Aurlandsfjord. My plan was to take the railway from Flam to Laerdal, but as soon as I entered the pier area, which is the final stop of the famous Flamsbana railway, I knew that my plans might be in jeopardy. A huge cruise ship had set anchors in Flam, and the pier was filled with hundreds of tourists. And indeed, all trips on the railway were sold out for much of the day. In hindsight, I should have booked my train ticket well in advance. I did visit the cozy museum that depicts the history of the Flamsbana railway construction and quickly left the tourist masses behind to see the Aurlandsfjord for more peaceful perspectives. From here, I had two options. Either I would take the Laerdal tunnel, the world's longest road tunnel with a whopping length of 24.5 kilometers or 15 miles, or I would take the much longer mountain pass, the Gamle Aurlandsvegen, the old Aurlandsway, that leads over a massive mountain plateau and descends all the way down to Lærdalsfjorden, that cuts through an adjacent valley and is part of Norway's longest fjord, the Sognefjorden. I opted for the mountain pass road, and little did I know that what was going to await me was one of the most spectacular drives of my entire Norway trip. I headed up to the narrow mountain street that offered breathtaking views of the fjord. Particularly, the Steggerstein lookout provided impressive perspectives of the valley below with its modern infinity bridge design. Gradually, the mountain scenery changed as I was crossing the timberline. Snowfields started to appear, blotting the majestic mountain plateau with white patches. For much of the winter months, this mountain road is closed due to the heavy snow masses, but in the summer months, the road is open for travelers. The landscape was rough, and the incoming clouds added to the special atmosphere. After quite some time, the rocky landscape made way for greener pastures again, and cows and sheep signaled the proximity of settlements. Once I arrived down at Lærdalsfjord, I could not help but take the trip through Laerdal Tunnel nevertheless. It's not often that one can say they traveled through the world's longest road tunnel. I continued my trip up Laerdal Valley, taking the old historical road that avoids the modern tunnels and provides magnificent views of the lush scenery with waterfalls and the historical Galdanic Cotter's Farm that sits tucked away on a small mountain meadow that contrasts with the steep mountain walls of the valley. At the end of the old mountain road, I spotted the Bergen stave church, yet another beautiful wooden masterpiece and Norway's most visited stave church. It was built around 1181 AD and is considered one of the best preserved stave churches in the country. This triple nave stave church features Norway's only surviving stave-built freestanding bell tower and lavishly carved portals. The carvings of dragons' heads on the roofs are particularly remarkable and look like they come right from a Viking ship. I returned back to Laerdal, making a short stopover at the old Laerdal village, which is beautifully situated around a small lake where ducks and seagulls are having fun playing around the wooden boats. From there, I went on to take the ferry boat from Fjords to Mannheller that crosses the awe-inspiring Sognefjorden. Arriving on the other side, I made a quick stop over in Kaupanger, a small village that is situated right at the shores of the fjord and stands out for its picturesque scenery and yet another stave church. I finished my day in Hasflo, where I stayed in a lovely wooden cabin overlooking Hasflovatnet Lake, with a mesmerizing backdrop to the mountain panorama that turns into ski slopes in the winter months. The next morning, I got up early to embark on my next hike. Hafrsfjord is very close to the biggest glacier in Norway, the monumental Jostedalsbreen. This glacier is massive and a must-see when visiting Norway. Numerous viewpoints and valleys offer different perspectives on glacier moraines that cut into the various valleys of the massive ice-capped mountain. Climate change has contributed to a significant melting of the glaciers in the last decades, and in many valleys, the glacier moraines are no longer reaching the glacier lakes, but hang way above in the upper rocks of the mountains. But my hike today would take me to the side of the glacier that is literally still at arm's length. I was going to do the Tungestolen hike. My drive to the Tungestolen was already part of the extraordinary experience of this special travel day. The historical narrow mountain road I took past emerald glacier lakes, narrow age-old tunnels without lighting, small lodgings and settlements with untarnished views over the gorgeous valley. Eventually, the tarmac road turned into gravel and the massive Jostedalsbreen appeared in front of me. The sight is nothing short of spectacular. Passing some grazing sheep, I parked my car at the end of the road and embarked on the hike. The trail first led through rocky and muddy passages, but eventually opened up into a wide field filled with pebbles and rocks. Leaving the pebble field behind me, shrubs and lower vegetation accompanied me for much of the pleasant hike. The elevation gain was minimal, and the trail was effortless compared to many of the other trails I would do on this trip. I followed the Emerald Glacier mountain stream to a somewhat steeper passage, which ultimately opened up to the unrivaled views of the Jostedalsbreen glacier moraine, falling right into the glacier lake filled with ephemeral bluish ice block fragments that would eventually fade into the glacier waters. I was able to walk all the way to the glacier moraine to the point where I could touch the bluish simmering ice. The blue color of the glacier ice blocks tricks our eyes as the ice absorbs all colors of the spectrum except blue. The ice is quite dense and, unlike snow, has few air bubbles, allowing sunlight to penetrate more deeply. The longer the light travels in the ice, the more blue it appears to our eyes. Since I did not come with a guided tour, I decided to stay at a safe distance from the huge ice blocks. Listening to the continuous cracking sounds, some of the blocks could collapse at any moment. Professional tour operators offer guided tours that allow visitors to walk on safe zones of the glacier, but I was here all alone, having the glacier all to myself, but also without help in a possible emergency. finished yet another glorious travel day in a cabin right at the shores of the picturesque Olden Bay at the far end of the Fjord. The next day would be filled with more adventures and visits to Norway's most iconic fjord, the Hardangerfjord, and the scary but impressive Trolltunga drive, which I cover in the next episode of my Norway documentary series.